Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Regional Mahjong League Winter Midseason Show. This is Korak. I am joined by Nathaniel. How are you doing, Nathaniel?
Doing well, Korak, and really looking forward to the second half of the season. But before we do that, we have to review what happened in the first three sessions.
Well, there's a whole bunch of action. We have a ton of divisions. 2B3 is going to have a beta league. There'll even be a C1 division next season. So ARML just keeps growing, and let's get into it. The first thing we're going to look at is B3B. One thing that was very interesting over the last season was we were actually joined by a couple JPML pros, and one of those here is Garth, sitting in sixth place, certainly in striking position for at least a playoff spot, if not an automatic promotion. But what else do you see on this list, Nathaniel, that jumps out at you?
Well, of course, the top three in the promotion zone right now, Melissa, Blaine, and Takahiro. Melissa's been in control for a while. Blaine started off the season amazingly well. I believe the first 6 games, only first and second places. It took a long time before he finally got his first third of the season, but doing quite well at plus 148.1. Blaine, of course, has been in the season since the inception of the ARML, has been grinding it out and doing extremely well so far. And the other player in the group, Takahiro, is a player who's actually plays pretty close to me in the Chicago group, and was, before the third session, was kind of in the middle of the pack, just slightly negative, and had just an insane session in this third one, pulling in over 100 points in one go to move into this third slot. So incredible performance from Taka.
Yeah, Takahiro was actually kind of near that demotion range. Not someone you would have expected to drop potentially into the C1, but pulled it together in session 3. And you just look at those stats at the highest EV in the entire division. We'll just go over this, but EV is kind of our internal metric. It is win rate times win average minus deal in rate times deal in average. It's a much better guide than anything specific because there are so many different styles for call rates, Ricci rates, but you can just try and roll things, but then you just want to see you're not dealing in as much, but you can afford more with very defensive players. I think EV score really tell you a lot over time.
Absolutely. And for Taka specifically, that's been that really low deal-in rate that's been sort of carrying that high EV. And that's something that I expected and was a little worried about. In fact, when you're playing in a B3 division, that's where all the new players to the league start, and so you have a mix of really strong, experienced players who've been playing for a long time, and some newer players who may not be as experienced. And sometimes it's not to your benefit to play for defensively. Sometimes you want to just be aggressive, and apparently that's what Blaine has been doing with that 32.7% win rate. Damien is well in the 5th slot, and so
if you're winning one out of every 3 games, you're pretty much unstoppable.
Absolutely.
But on the alternative, what we look at, and I see at the very top, is 3 single-digit deal-in rates, and they are 1, 3, and 4 in the division.
Yeah, it just goes to show that you can get away with playing a cautious style, defensive style. And Jai in 4th place here, 5% deal-in rate, and only 18% wins. But as long as you're not dealing in, has been rewarded for that with the 4th place overall.
As they say, we talk about EV as just kind of that rule of thumb, and you can see it's not exactly 1-to-1, but it's very strongly correlated. Whereas win rate, you can even see down in the middle, Greg at the 23.1, solid win percent, but currently in a playoff to the potential demotion. So there are plenty of ways to play, plenty of ways to advance. We have a whole lot of different styles. All right. Do we have a clip for this, or are we just going to B3A? Oh, you have a clip.
Boom. They see none. I bet. Oh, there's the green.
So double Yaku. No. Quadruple Yakuhai, Honitsu, Shosanga, and Wandora. How much is that?
That's a dealer Baimon. That's a 24,000 point hand. If you draw the 9-so, it becomes a 10 hot hand. No, because you have to discard Dora. Oh, she's so close to it.
You can see there, this is Garth, one of the pros in the league, who's talked about earlier, just having an absolute monster hand. And you can see the hand at the beginning of this clip, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. But at the same time, very interested that across the way with this Takahiro held the Chun and could have dealt into a really expensive dealer Baimon there, but instead just pays out the Sumo. And those are the types of plays you need to be making to be able to stay where you are or potentially advance.
Yeah, watching the hand develop was incredible. I was doing the broadcast as Edwin and Tucker were on the call, and Garth, started with a reasonably strong hand. It just kept getting better and better. Those Yakuhai kept getting paired up. And that entire time, Takahiro across the table was just holding singleton Hatsu, singleton Tone, singleton Chun, refusing to let those come out. It wasn't until the wall gave Taka what was close to Tempai that he finally gave up the Hatsu and said, I'll try one. If it passes, maybe I can try another one. But if it gets called, I'm out. And he was out for the rest of it, was not going to deal that Chun into what was an incredibly expensive hand from Garth. And this was very early on. It was so exciting to see. You heard Edwin just go absolutely bonkers when that Sumo came in. But yeah, we had a lot of incredible hands, not just from B3, but also just around the league. Every single division just about had an incredible moment like this.
And especially in these Beta League pools sitting here in B3, it's very important to get the value out of the hand you can. So you see that here. And again, I also want to say again that the not dealing that Chun is a huge difference. Takahiro is not in a particularly great spot. All right, I think that's it. We're going to take a look at B3A now. So the first name, of course, to jump out is Jen, as Garth joined the league in the B pool. Jen is in the A pool, not doing quite as well. Remembering to everyone, it can happen to anyone, even if you're a pro. It can be pretty savage. Alan, who was a great performer at WRC, I believe in the top 32, didn't get out of the B3 pool last season, so has another chance and is certainly riding the ship here.
Absolutely. Plus 107 at 12 games into the things. Kind of balanced performance, but 5 wins is certainly leading the way. Jake and Emily close behind with similar stats here. But for Alon, it's, 26% win rate is kind of carrying, as there's a relatively high deal-in percentage compared to some of these other names. But Emily as well has a high deal-in percentage. But that 33.8 win percent, so out of these two divisions, so far the highest, I believe. And in this division, it seems to be that the wins are really carrying these players.
Well, one thing you're seeing is there aren't one or two people that are really pulling away from the pack. It's just kind of a gradual trickle all the way down. There's a big gap between Miguel and Cesar, but that's about it. Everyone else is, 10, 15, less than 20 points behind the next person.
And that means that any of these players, if they can just have an absolutely amazing series like we saw from Taka this session, pick up not even 100 points. Say you pick up 50 points or 80 points in one go, you're going to skyrocket up the standings. And we have 3 sessions for one of these players to pull that off.
I talk about a bunch of differing styles, and Jake's is, to me, basically incomprehensible. A call rate under 20%, a reachy rate under 20%. So only really involved in less than 40% of hands, and yet sitting here in second, in large part due to that deal-in percentage of 7.7. It's an excellent defense there.
Yeah, I watched Jake play a couple games, couple Hanshan, and really picks his spot, builds for value, and pushes the value when he has it. If he doesn't have the value, you don't need to get involved in the dealing into the other hands. And so has been working out quite well with 3 firsts and 5 second places, and only 1 fourth this season.
And one of the players we said to pay attention to at the beginning of the season is Viet, currently in 4th place. definitely someone to spend a lot of times with the bots trying to figure out how they think, has written a lot about it. Definitely worth checking out. And it's just consistent play. And that's how he's always been. It's just consistent. And if you're playing like and thinking like those bots, that's what you're aiming for is consistency. That 8.6% dealing rate. The win percent isn't that high, but the average win is certainly pretty good. Right there around 6,000. You see so many of these people in the top 6 right at that 6,000 range. The only one that isn't is Emily, who's doing it with that 34% win rate.
Yeah, and even as you go down to the 8th place, Michael W with 6,000, over 6,000, almost 6,500 average win, although it is only 18%, definitely carrying there. Only 1/4 place for Michael there.
And you just, again, we say it over and over. The EV tells the story, and you see maybe Eric's a little bit lower than should be, but everyone else pretty well lines up. You see a little bit of variance down there at the very bottom, but even so, in large part, that's because of the deal-in rates you get towards the bottom end. They're sitting there at the 17, 20% range, and you can make it out. You see Cesar is sitting here with a 21% deal-in rate, but a 6,700 winning average, and is currently in what would be a demotion playoff spot.
Gosh, just imagine what that scoreline would look at with a little bit smaller deal-in percentage. You could be way up in the standings with that. And for Eric, I think when you have that big gap in your EV and your placement, it's probably indicative of some really tight games where you're holding the line, but someone just sumos something in the end and knocks you down a placement. You're getting a second where you maybe could have gotten a first, or you're getting a third when it could have been a second, or even a fourth that could have been a third. And then it knocks you down in the standings overall, even though your stats look fairly strong. Of course, you never know if the next session maybe you get that first instead of the second and just shoots you up.
One thing I always try to pay attention to is the EV of a division compared to the league average, and they're right there, 504 versus 502. But on the other hand, call and reach rate, they're significantly less open hands, with that 31.6% call as opposed to a 33.1 overall. Normally, you tend to think of newer players as very aggressive, call happy, just going for what they see and just chasing it, but not really here. They're much more build for value, take advantage, and you see it reflected in these win averages.
Absolutely. I mean, Cesar in 13th place here, that amazingly high average win rate. It's no surprise to see that he's got the highest Ricci rate at this table as well. You tend to build more value when you're declaring Ricci, and that 34.7% Ricci rate definitely makes sense.
And here we see a couple really high call rates at the very bottom, but other than that, you said Michael sitting there at 40%, not that far behind. You're doing just fine at 42, plus 42 overall, certainly within striking range, and we're only at the midway point, so that's someone to watch. See if Michael V can pull it together. Of course, when you have Michael and Michael back-to-back, that's when it gets a little confusing for us, but you can see here Michael W with that ridiculous 64.73 win average.
Yeah, and there are a lot of Michaels in this league. Fortunately, only 2 in this division currently. But once they start moving up, I mean, who knows? Maybe in B2 there's a Michael or 2. We could get an all-Michael table, perhaps.
Another thing that I think is worth noting that isn't always paid attention to is the division average win percentage. So yeah, wait, how's the difference between divisions? And you stop and think about, it means there are a lot less draws in B3A. Hands are actually finishing. If you are sitting at a 22.6% win rate, multiply that times 4, that means you're only getting those draws right around 10% of the time. That means that overall at 22%, it's going to be a lot higher on the average for the rest of the leagues.
Yeah, that's a good point. Players seem to be willing to take the fight in this division.
All right. I don't think we have a clip for this one. Let's jump to B2.
I see a lot of names here from B3 last season that promoted into B2, also performing really well here. Right up at the top, Eric, Dave, Harrison, Jonathan, I believe all 5 of these players in the promotion zone currently were in B3 last season. Will as well, and possibly Ryan as well, all promoting from B3 the previous season and continuing their hot streak so far in the first 3 sessions this season.
Well, with that ridiculously big pool of B3 last season, there's no surprise that a big chunk of B2 ended up being those players that were in B3 that managed to move up. But you definitely see them performing. Of course, there at the top, you see Eric and Dave, just all these really low deal-in rates. There's only one person that isn't colored there with at least at the highest being 12.2. There's only one person that's nicked near the bottom that isn't in that top 11.
Yeah, impressive display of defense here at the top. And it's not as if it's at a sacrifice of offense either. Those win percentages are incredibly high, 25% and up for the top 3. And Jonathan, even with a 20% in 4th place.
And similarly, so you can take a look at their set. Now, their call, reach, and participation rate seem to line up pretty well with the averages. So they're playing just pretty standard Mahjong, not that much different. The EV is a little bit less. They're not building for quite as much value as maybe some of the others. But you can see here that they're also have a reduced deal in. This is another one we've talked about. You think of people in B3, B2, maybe even B1 as kind of reckless players who are just going for it. And if you're keeping that deal in average below the league average, it means you're playing more defensive than people might think. 14.1% isn't particularly low, but it shows the types of variance and the types of defense that you're seeing even in B2.
And as you noted before, the division average win percent, 21.5%, lower than the league average. So this is definitely indicative of more hands going to draws, more defensive play seen in this division.
Right, that'd be a 14% of hands would be going to draws, if I'm doing the math right here. And it's the same story basically everywhere. High win percent, low deal in percent, results in the high EV and pretty good standings. You see it over and over and over. Simple game, huh? Just win hands and don't deal in.
If only it was that easy. We have.
I think we have a clip to show off for this.
With a closed con of 4 pin.
Yeah, now you can even throw the Dora. There's Tempai.
Each.
Oh, if you would have cut the 9 so last turn, this would have been. Yeah. Oh no, I think I like the
down for
Suanko. No, it's not Sunshu Doko. No. This would be like ultimate tragedy if it is 1 that this is not Doko. I just cut 9 mon here.
And that makes a lot of sense. Oh, Dora comes out.
Oh, just eats the Dora into it. Oh, Sumo! Riichi, Sumo, Sunanko, Dora 3, or 4 Sanbaimon!
Incredible! We said it was
Brett Taylor turn 2. I think that overtakes.
Yeah,
just hit the casual Aura 4 into Sanbaimon. You always feel really sad with those types of shapes with a 7, 8, 8, 8, 9.
Yeah.
And then hit the Sunanko and just flip Aura 4 for a beautiful Sanbaimon there for Daniel.
It's so exciting when you get to Riichi with 2 cons on the table. And even though the weight was a little awkward, it paid off in spades. And the only sad thing was that it couldn't be the Sancho Gudoko.
Yes, you have all those 8s. You actually have 3 8s in the hand of all 3 suits. No, I'm sorry, because the 8 so was drawn. If the 8 pin had been drawn, that would have been the situation. But even then, it still would have been in Sancho Gudoko because of the way the hand was actually constructed. Oh, wait, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, because then it would have been your pair.
Yeah, just falling short one way or another. And if you end up not having that 8 act as the pair, that means you've probably built Suanko instead, which is almost the same value as the Sanbaimon.
I mean, I'll take a Sun Baimon any day of the week.
Yeah, this was one of those games where Brett had pulled it way ahead at the start, got chased down at the end. It was going to take a miracle for someone to come back, and Daniel pulled off the miracle.
Well, as we say over and over, just sumo. All right, let's head back to the standings for this division. Now you see there, Brett has had some monstrous wins. He's also had some big losses. Overall, sitting at minus 66.3, out of the demotion range. So managing to stave it off here, you saw there with that big score. So all the way up and down, there's a lot of talent. And another name that we may think of is William S. It's Overlord Whale, who has been just really unfortunate. And I review some of those games. There's just not anything you can do some of the time. So even in your that demotion range, as long as you're playing correctly, you figure you should get it to balance up. You have 12 games left.
Yeah, I mean, right now, to get out of the demotion zone, you need to find the mark where Andrew L is sitting currently, negative 77. And William's not that far out, just around 23 points, 23.6. And you can easily pick that up in one game. Now, of course, this line's going to shift. But if you can just maintain some small positive scores throughout the remainder of the season, you should be doing all right if you are Kujira or William. And that's true for the rest of the players. Even Cruz currently in the last place, not out of it by any stretch of the imagination, with a couple good wins and perhaps get your first win of the season. Currently sitting at 0 in a lot of seconds. Turn one of those seconds into a first place and then build off of that momentum. Can avoid the demotion zone.
One person whose stats just scream at me are Stevens. 25% win rate, 7.8% deal-in rate, and only at plus 28. Like, how's that possible? Then you see the average deal-in is rough. But if you don't deal in that much, you can get away with that. So Stevens still in a pretty good position to at least stay in B2 and potentially make a push towards B1.
Absolutely. And how are things doing in B1?
All right, let's take a shift over to B1. See at the very top, that's Christian, who I believe came down from A2 last season, but kind of bouncing up and down, sitting in that B1, A2 range. You have Tommy in second with a ridiculous spread, 32.9% win rate and 9.4% deal-in rate. And in third, we have Jacob, and then Alfred, Michael, Eric, and Jonathan, who's round up the guaranteed promotion spots were the season to end today.
And of course, there is a pretty big gap. Christian in first place to second place. Assuming Christian can hang on, even if you're just getting seconds and thirds for the rest of the season, should be able to promote fairly easily, and would not be surprised to see that happen. I mean, even though there's a somewhat higher deal-in percentage, 13.8, look at that average, only 3,790. That is pretty strong. No surprise to see Christian with an EV of over 1,000 here.
And lowest deal-in average is actually Anya sitting there in ninth. A really high win rate and not dealing into that expensive a hand. You see that 934 EV, and with that result, I'd expect to be a lot higher. Probably had some really rough games there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have a clip of Anya, actually. One of the better games, perhaps. And yeah, it is a little surprising that only in ninth place here currently. But I think of Anya as a fairly aggressive player, and it makes sense that she is in the positives with that small average deal in. If you're going to be an aggressive player, at least make sure that the hands that you deal into are relatively small ones, that the hands you're building towards are large ones. It looks like that's exactly what Anya's putting together.
And you see in this division, a lot of the familiar names had been in the scene for a long time. Sarah, Rachel, Aldwin, Edwin, our founder of ARML, Travis. Just these are players that have been around for a while, and they go up and they can go down because the game is inherently volatile.
Yeah, I said at the beginning of the season, the hype stream, B1 was the division that I was most interested in seeing how it played out, because all these players are fairly experienced and they're strong players in their own right. And I really could not predict who was going to advance out. Even at this point, it looks like Christian's pretty safe, and maybe Tommy and Jacob as well. But outside of those, it's really tight to see who's going to be able to make it out. A lot can happen in the final 3 sessions.
Interesting stats, which is one of those things that always jumps out at me. Look at Sarah's win rate versus deal-in rate. 17.3% win rate, 19.4% deal-in rate, dealing in a lot more than winning, and yet still in the positive. Just building that value, not dealing into a bunch of expensive stuff, probably picking up a whole bunch of temp-buy payments along the way. Even with a 186 EV, which in terms of the division would definitely put you in the demotion rate, still just here knocking on the door of promotion A2.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the high deal-ins must have been in games that ended up being thirds, right? Otherwise, if you're usually, at least from my stats, my big deal-ins tend to give me big fourths, and that's what's been knocking me down. But for Sarah, if she's been able to turn those into just thirds and mitigate the damage, then you can stay in the positives if you're getting large enough firsts to make up for it, and that seems to be happening here.
Yeah, counterbalance, someone who's not really opening that much. The participation rate's very low, but the lowest participation rate in this division is Eric, who's kind of been in the downfall in A1. Of course, won the inaugural Beta League season, stayed in A1, and then got demoted the last 2 seasons, is looking to fight back into A2 now. Will also be in the Championship Series, which, by the way, will be taking place tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow evening, the first match of the Championship Series between all the winners of last year, either the inaugural Beta League or the Division A1 top player. They'll be facing off, and they'll be so excited to watch that.
It'll just be the first 2 games of that series, but it'll be Eric, Huang, Luce, and Kenyon battling it out for the 2022 championship. Of course, I realize we're a fair bit into 2023 at this point. We asked them, hey, could you guys get this done in January? And they're like, nah.
Of course, there's always a little bit of scheduling to take place, and it's always more difficult when players are out of the country. So excited to see that series finally get started.
Oh yeah, definitely something to watch. Check in tomorrow. But the rest of back to B1 here, the rest of these stats, you just see kind of varying plays, varying play styles all across. It's kind of hard to pull in a common theme here. The win rate and deal-in rates are pretty standard averages. The call rate's pretty standard. The reach rate's pretty standard. Position rate's maybe a little bit lower when you combine everything, but just overall, it's just a very variable division.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting when we were looking at the higher participation rate. We're sitting at the bottom of the standings, whereas in this division, the players with the high participation rates are sitting nearer to the top. And if you are skilled at putting together hands that have value, then it makes sense that you'd want to participate more. If your average win is going to be larger than your average loss, you want to be involved in more hands, and you certainly see that happening here.
And of course, we see some of the people that came from A2 are performing well, and some of the people from B2 last season putting it together here. And just a very exciting division. If there's one division, of course, outside of A1, but I'm completely not biased.
Yeah, not at all.
To pay attention to, this would be the one.
And we will definitely be keeping a close eye on B1 in the final 3 sessions of the winter season.
All right, I think we have a clip.
That we just see at 7.
Okay,
he's going to cut the 9-1.
So the wall is tempting you.
So pretty nice dodge.
Sumo
but it doesn't matter when you just get the Sumo. Are we going to see the Ura?
There's one!
Oh, Paimon the Ura! Wow. And oh man.
I said Anya wants 80,000.
Jeez.
And Edwin's looking at that draw and saying, "I
And you
made
see
the
there
right."
Anya just running up the score, and that's why Anya's in the position. Could be a lot worse when you look at those overall results. I believe it was 2-3, 3-4. But you win hands like that, you get wins like that. That's how you manage to end up with a net positive score, even with those results.
Good thing there isn't Toby in this league. Otherwise, Anya would have killed 2 players in one go. Both Sam and Edwin falling into the negatives in one sumo. Anya in this game had been absolutely dominating. She went on a bit of a dealer run in her first dealership and then passed it around. Edwin had dealt into a big hand, but came back into the positives and won a pretty big dealer Mongon of his own. And in this hand, Edwin was being tempted by the wall. Saw the Ricci, was folding out, and then the wall kept giving him more tiles closer to Tenpai. He said, "No, I refuse to drop this 7-pin. It is not going to leave my hand." And good thing it didn't, because that ended up being a very expensive hand. Should be noted, Eric as well, on the right, 47,000 points. It almost looks like it's a kind of close battle. It took a dealer run of his own to even get up that high. All the players were super low in points, and Eric won a couple big dealer hands to move over 30,000 all the way up to 47,000. Anya took it right back.
See those tiles being held, and you're like, "Come on, where are they?" "Okay, I give up. I'll just drop myself, and I'll take the Baimon, thanks."
This was an incredible match to watch. So many massive hands. I mean, it's like every other hand was at least 12,000 points.
All right. I think that's about it for this division. Let's head to A2. So, first thing to note is Andrew, who was cruising in B1, appears to continue the streak here, sitting with 6 firsts out of 12 games. The EV is a little bit lower than second place, who's Matthew, with that ridiculous 26.4% win rate and 9.3% deal-in rate, but just not getting as many points in the hand. Peter in excellent position, as is Alex and Pio. All of those over 6,000 win averages with very low deal-in averages. And you just see it continuing down the middle and towards the bottom, but Joshua and Ada both over 30% win rate. And the deal-in rates are still, they're kind of high, but not when you have that type of win rate. The participation rate in this division is just nuts.
70%, 70.9% for Ada is ridiculous.
Just overall, 2.2% higher participation rate, meaning that on average, you're going to have an extra person either calling or reaching about every 12 hands compared to every other division.
Yeah, it seems to be the theme in, the theme in this division seems to be the win rate here. At the top, we see high win average, high win rate. And as we move down, we still see reasonably high win average, but either the deal is getting really large there, or the win rates, the win average is getting too small to compensate low deal-in percentage. And we see at the bottom, Philip has a very low deal-in average, only 3,300, the smallest that I've seen so far, and yet doesn't have a large enough win percent or average to compensate it. Unfortunately, dealing into a lot of hands there. Still yet to find a first place, but perhaps we can find that in the second half. Start to climb.
Being that this is A2, you have a bunch of people that have been in A1 before, looking to fight their way back. And of course, Andre sitting there at 6, just knocking on the window to get back, is in the best position of that group. But you can see here, maybe John, Patrick, and Philip are out of the running. I think anyone else here could make it all the way to the promotion zone.
Yeah, for those you named, perhaps your aim is not to make it to the promotion zone, but at least get out of the negatives, which is certainly doable here. And everyone else can certainly pull it off in 3 sessions. And we saw Ada pull off a ridiculous comeback at the end of the last season to avoid demotion. Andres as well making a big push. And really, any of these players are capable of building massive hands. I mean, I see Dustin, Joe, Riley, 3 names there that I know all of those players are capable of putting together monsters and could just have an incredible series to push them all the way into the promotion zone in one go.
I know Pio sitting there in 5th is someone who'd been underperforming a little bit compared to expectations. Actually got into A2 last season as part of an extra invite because there was a last-second hiatus, and got a promotion and certainly doing with it what you can hope for with that 64-16 win average, currently in a promotion spot.
Yeah, showing that Pio belongs here in this division and hopefully moving up into A1 next season.
And even at the bottom, I'm kind of amused. We have a -3, a -4, and a -5 EV.
Kind of odd that we have.
Say they're evenly matched, but
numbers.
That's pretty evenly matched.
Yeah.
But you see a little more aggression. Called a little bit more. Ricci's a little bit more. A little more active. The EV, on the other hand, is way lower than the other division. That actually surprises me a bit.
I wonder if it's a bit of the balance that you're talking about. It's harder to press so easily against the other players in this division. You have to be a little bit more cautious with what you see happening at the table, not allowing you to just go full force aggression that maybe you can do in the B divisions.
You see a higher win rate, a higher deal-in rate, and that lower EV rate. So definitely a more aggressive structure, as you would expect, than when you check the call and Ricci rates. Very volatile division. And you look at this is another one of those where you have incredibly volatile players. Huang will be in the championship. Ada, of course, is well known for that. Andre, Pio, and just you can expect some wild play in A2. All right, I think we have a clip.
Fold here. It's kind of, 7-mon is a dangerous draw, but actually is willing to fold here.
Interesting. A lot of.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm always very reluctant to fold Mongon Tenpai.
If you are convinced that 7-mon deals in, we'll just switch to a different Tenpai.
Well, pivot back to Tenpai. You lost your Honitsu, but you do still have Toi Toi here.
Yeah, no Honitsu, no Yakuhai, but still Toi Toi. It's Sumo!
Wow, okay.
Brilliant!
And so just draws 3 straight 7-mon to get the Toi Toi Sumo.
Now that is the sign of a true Toi Toi aficionado. Toi Toi, not a Yaku that I am well versed in.
So you see that, and this is a little different than most of our other clips, but this is one where Ken says, you know what, I can't throw it, but you know what else I can do? I could just sumo it myself, and does in 3 consecutive turns, and that's how you get those lesser win values, but they don't end. The game doesn't end. The hand will continue until that sumo happens. People are fighting even in the Dia de Ricci, just not giving up, and rewarded there with a surprise Toi Toi with 3 7-mon in a row.
Yeah, this was one of the funniest moments of the first half. Throwing away the Honitsu, could not afford to drop the 7-mon, and you don't have to when you just draw 3 in a row. I was quite amused when it was pulled off here by Kevin.
All right, let's head back to the stats. So any other thoughts before we head to A1? I was kind of looking at Riley and seeing those the win and deal in are about what you'd expect, what you'd hope for, is the averages are a little bit flipped. You'd like that win average to be the 96-95. That's why Riley's sitting at -15.3, but that can certainly be worked on. See all these Ricci rates in the high 20s.
Yeah, Riley and Andrew were the top 2 players out of B1 last season. Riley going 3-3-3-3 so far. Perfectly even, and has a scoreline too that shows -50.3, right around 0. Hoping to flip those numbers as you were alluding to in the second half of the season.
But Matthew here with the strongest EV in the division by a lot, sitting at 1,064 with that ridiculous win rate, an incredibly low deal-in rate. 76 feels a little low with those results, but if you can pull that together, you're going to easily cruise to A1.
Yeah, as we keep moving up and up in the divisions, the number of players who are over 1,000 with their EV seems to be dropping. I wonder what the case will be for A1.
Let's take a look at A1 then.
Hello.
Not anymore. As you see, 5 people at the very top, including 3 with EVs over 1,000, and Kenyon with a ridiculous 1,300 EV. Remember, this is the top division. This isn't a bunch of new players. These are veterans here in this division who are going at it, and Kenyon just rolling right now. Kathy was actually in first place up until the last game, but took a 4th there and will drop to 2nd, but they're way ahead of everyone.
Kenyon and Kathy neck and neck. No surprise to see Kenyon at the top. After all, she will be playing in the championship game. However, those stats are beyond absurd. I mean, 25.7% win rate with a very high average as well. Only 7.9% deal-in. And look at the average. Less than 3,000. I am so jealous.
Yeah, those are just amazing stats. And we talked about how the EV at A2 felt a little lower. Well, at A1, it's the opposite. With an extra 54 on the EV. The wins are about 110 more, but the important part is they just don't deal in as much. You see a 1.3 reduction from the league as a whole. In terms of aggression, it's not a particularly aggressive division, with the except of some weirdo named Korak. But you see the low call rate, reach rate's about the same. The end result, participation rate is there. And then in third place, we have Lucas, who is actually sitting around ±0 and absolutely went off in his third match. And we were both in that. And that was not fun to face.
As opponents, it was suffering. For Lucas and the people watching the stream, it was probably absolutely thrilling. I mean, I believe there's a dealer Baimont sumo in one of the hands as part of like 3 consecutive sumos. I think he got 2 firsts and 2 seconds in that series, and just absolutely dominated. Jumped all the way to 3rd, and with another session like that, could even overtake 1st.
Yeah, I say we go up, sitting around ±0 going into that series, but that's what's happened in every one of my series. This one I get on my Salt platform. That the first session, Minka went off with about a 110. And the second one, Kenyon went off with about a 130. And in session 3, Lucas went off with around a +130. So apparently everyone else's good luck charm.
Yeah, it's a shame that Lucas was the recipient of the good luck when we were playing against each other. I would have loved just to see some of that. Unfortunately for me, the issue has been not winning big hands. I mean, look at that average win for me at 3,420. Not super strong. And yeah, I need to flip the average win amount and average deal-in amount numbers. Those are swapped.
Well, I have a different issue. I'm just not winning in the first place. Sitting here at that 16.7% win rate and 16% deal-in rate, I'm being aggressive, being involved in every hand I can. By far the highest petition rate in A1. I'm just losing a bunch of those fights. But look at the bottom here with the demotion range, and there are a few names we kind of expected to be in a little bit of danger. There are also a couple that are a big surprise, particularly Bishan, who has been in A1 since the very first season, managed to get in the qualifier after the inaugural Beta League season, and has been pretty safe in A1, with the exception of that spring season where the cutoff ended up being ±0. Like, everyone was scared.
Unfortunately for Beechin, I think he has been in some of those series where players gone off. I think he was in the series where Kenyon went off, and you're not going to do well when Kenyon's popping off in that series. I think it was also in a series against Zalong, who managed to just grab some huge wins. And again, if one player has 60,000 points, the rest of the players at the table are probably not feeling too good. And it's been a difficult go of things.
Well, yeah, we've talked about it going into the season. There are 5 people that have been in A1 from the start. Those are Kenyon, Max, Steve, me, and Bishan. And Bishan's in a lot of danger, and I'm in some danger. I was actually feeling pretty good after my 9th game of 12, sitting around plus 40, and have not won a single hand since.
But we can't expect that to happen for the rest of the second half. There still are 3 more sessions to go.
Being salty and whining about it.
Yeah, so chances for everyone in the demotion zone to get out. Should be noted, of course, there is an extra demotion slot this season in A1, as there are 21 players instead of 20. We'll make things a little bit more challenging. And right now, there's a bit of a gap to the safety zone. Oliver currently at 58.4 in the negatives, and that's about 32 points ahead of Claire currently. So it's going to take a lot of effort.
Oliver was there down where you were at the minus 105 range, and they just went off in the last game, and is now at least a little bit clear of the grouping. And you're sitting there with that 10% separation, the 10% rule, that even if you're dealing in 15% of the time, if you're winning 25, you should be okay. But minus 58.4 isn't particularly ideal. We haven't spent much time talking about the other end of this, and that is the long, just consistent play. Dropped all the way to B1 in the Irish Beta League season, but basically been solid every season since. Not been in any real danger of not promoting in B1 and A2, and then in A1 has definitely done fine there. Max, who's sitting there at 83, so definitely had a good chance to make it up there. I believe was higher and took a couple hits at the end there. But with that 1100 EV and the 6950 average win, feeling very good there.
Yeah, it's nice to see Max up at the top after what we saw on stream. There were a couple of moments of bad luck for Max earlier this season. In fact, that might be one of the clips that we have.
Yeah, that is one of the clips. Let's go ahead and jump to that while we're on this topic. Sue as well.
No way.
There are 2 left in the wall. This could actually happen again.
No.
Oh, what? There it is.
That's unbelievable.
2 Rian Peiko on stream, and I think they were both Kathy winning off Dama on a Tanyao against Max.
Yeah, Max was temp by both times. That's unbelievable.
As well. And yeah, I was calling that match, and that along with you, and that was absolutely crazy. Max managed to deal into Rian Peiko, one of the rarest Yaku out there, significantly rarer than most Yakumon, and did it twice to the same person in the same game.
It was unbelievable to see. I believe it was back-to-back games. The first game was an East 1 deal, and the second was an East 2 deal, and it was just so odd. You never see Rian Peiko, and to see it twice, and to the same person, the same winner, same loser, it was incredible. And both times, Max had a tempai worth fighting for, and so Kathy was climbing. I mean, if you look at the standings right now, Kathy is in 7th in this clip, and climbed all the way up to 1st, I believe, when all things were said and done. At the end of the series, or at least got very close. It was quite a jump, and Kathy doing in position to potentially play in the championship game at the end of this year.
For some context, I've had 2 Rian Peiko in my life, and I've probably played 3,500 to 4,000 games, somewhere in there. And Kathy has hit them in back-to-back just like that, off the same player.
The two Rian Peiko hands were very similar as well. I believe the final weight was in the pin suit for both hands, and it was just absolutely crazy to see live.
All right, let's head back to the stats. And so even with that, Max is still in a very good position. It's just there's such a gap because Kenyon and Kathy went off.
Yeah, I mean, Kenyon, Kathy, Lucas, the only players above 100 currently. And there's time. If one of these players, 4th, 5th, 6th, they have a session just like the other three, you could definitely find yourself in a similar position. It's going to be difficult to expect any of those players to drop down significantly. They're so strong, you'd expect that they're going to keep climbing and that you have a lot of work ahead of yourself.
They have the next few spots, Aaron Zhu and Minko, very stable players, different aggressiveness, but generally pretty by the book, all of whom have done pretty well since making it to A1 and are all sitting in those, not really competing for the championship yet, but still in position and not really that scared of demotion.
An interesting name at this division, Steve. Steve is in the somewhat awkward position of being the fifth player at every table this season is in a group of 5, and it's a little bit difficult because the meta at the table changes depending on who's playing just slightly, and scheduling's a little bit more difficult. But Steve has managed to make it work despite the start of the season being a little bit awkward. Things just were not going, did not have the flow. And despite all the trials and tribulations of the first half, has managed to stay, positive in 11th place currently.
Well, that 16.8% win rate, the hands just aren't coming together. I believe the lowest or second lowest participation rate in all of A1 had just not been involved that much in dying to sumos, but winning enough to stay above water.
Yeah, slightly higher deal-in percentage than Steve typically has. However,
Haru, a recent promotion from A2, who had promoted twice, I believe promoted every season, was not in the inaugural beta league, and promoted every season since, and is now in A1 and sitting there in the positives as well. Luce, who of course is in that championship game, is going for the Saki Award at plus 0.1.
See if Luce can hold it off.
Definitely trying to pull. When you're sitting there at that score, like, I'd really like to go for the championship, but I think I just want to stay out of demotion range.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jump from there. I mean, once you get past, I don't know, the 50s, you're really just hoping not to fall further and make things get scary. I mean, anyone who's around 0 or below is really just trying to avoid demotion, and that includes Anthony, Arthur, Oliver.
Yeah, I say Oliver was way down there and managed to get a big win on the end. And Anthony is someone who has been pretty stable since being in A1, but hasn't really gotten together this season. The relatively low win rate, but that's such a consistent theme. We see it over and over. A lot of these sub 20% win rates for people you wouldn't expect it. And overall, just the division win average is 21.3%, which, let me think, so that means we have a 15% of hands are going to draws. That is a lot.
Yeah, and not surprising. It feels like every time I've had a manga in hand, it's gone to Ryukoku. Just not able to Tsumo and no one deals in.
But this is the top division. You see plenty of differing styles, high participation rates, low participation rates. But the consistent theme overall seems to be if you can keep that deal-in rate low, you'll do well. And when I look at what's happened, especially the games I've been involved with those players, they're winning their head-to-heads.
Generally, you're going to expect these players to be able to put together high average wins. If they're winning hand, it's going to be worth a lot of points. So the deciding factor then is how low can your deal-in percentage and average be? And, well, currently, Kenyon is winning that race.
That sub 8% deal-in rate, but overall, 4 of the top 5 sitting under 10%, which is very impressive. Again, at the top division, because anyone in this division can build value.
Yes. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting race to see who can stave off the other at the end, and will we see a surprise victor? Currently, it looks like it's between Ken and Kathy Lucas, but someone might be able to jump ahead. We have about 6 more weeks to figure that out.
Right, and I'll definitely be paying more attention to the demotion race, as I presume you and fellow commentator Ennui, and sitting in 18th right now, will definitely be involved in that. We joked about in the preseason, all 3 of us are going down, and it's entirely plausible right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe we should be a little bit more careful about our jokes because they're becoming reality.
All right, then. I think that's about it for A1. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, again, just a reminder about that championship game. I have been looking forward to this since we knew who the 4 players were back in December. And it's finally going to happen tomorrow. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see. It should be 4-game series, so 2 will be played on Tuesday and 2 will be played at a later date. I'm so excited to crown our first champion.
We have a time for that. I didn't get one sent to me, but I know they have to have somewhere.
We do have a time for that. I believe it is 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, that's what it says here. Okay, I did get it passed now. It is 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific tomorrow night. We don't know who will be casting it, but we will definitely have it here on American Ricci here on Twitch. And looking forward to a very exciting match, a whole bunch of very different styles. I can't think of 2 people that are particularly as polarized as the play styles of Eric and Huang.
Yeah, although there's some more similarities than you'd expect, those 2 definitely have very unique play styles, and it is going to be interesting to see how they play off each other. Also, with players Loose and Kenyon at the table, sometimes Eric and Huang can be a bit disruptive in their play style, whereas Loose and Kenyon perhaps more by the book, and it will be, I don't know, I have no idea how it's going to play out, how those playstyles will interact with each other.
Well, I think Eric is also a by-the-book player, but it's just a different book. He plays much more of a pro style, which is Sakigiri heavy, that you're not going to be playing all the hands. You're going to be just shutting things down when necessary. And it's much less of the online style that you see from more Kenyon and Loose, which is going to fight basically when you can. And Huang, who's just going to go for it.
Yeah, Huang went for it in the final series of the, I believe it was the spring season, the season after the beta league, inaugural beta league, and just dominated the series that it took to be the champion. It was going to be a race between the players at those table, and he just won the first 3 games, blew it out of the water, and really surprised a lot of people. And we'll see if Huang is able to pull it off one more time.
All right. So that is going to be about it. And so this is, I think, when we wrap it up, unless you have any other closing thoughts.
No, that's it for me.
All right, then. This is when we plug everything. The YouTube, tinyurl.com/RMLYT. You can follow us on Twitter or here on Twitch. And if you're interested in the league, you can sign up for the next season on AmericanRicci.org. On our website, we also have repositories of games to see how our players are playing, up-to-date standings, all that good stuff. So for Nathaniel, this is Korak in the American Ricci Mahjong League signing off. Have a good day.